Europe's biggest economies are stagnating. Growth is anemic. Confidence is shaken. But one nation just placed a $700 billion bet that could flip the entire power structure of the continent. Poland, a country most people associate with history, not headlines, is pouring money into an infrastructure and military build-up so aggressive, analysts are asking if it could become Europe's next true superpower by 2030. This isn't speculation. The spending is real, the timeline is set, and the implications are massive. Let's be honest, when you think about European power, you think Germany, France, maybe the UK despite Brexit. Poland doesn't make the list. It's seen as a mid-tier economy, respectable but not a contender. And for decades, that assessment was accurate. But something shifted. While traditional powers wrestled with sluggish GDP growth, aging populations and political gridlock, Poland started moving fast. Between 2000 and 2023, Poland's GDP grew by over 300% in nominal terms. That's not a typo. 300%. Germany, by comparison, grew around 90% over the same period. France barely crossed 80. And then in 2022, Poland's government unveiled the plan, $700 billion allocated over the next decade, split between military modernization, infrastructure megaprojects, and technology hubs. The stated goal wasn't modest growth or incremental improvement. It was explicit: position Poland as a Central European power by 2030, not a regional player, a power. The scale is staggering. To put it in perspective, $700 billion represents roughly 140% of Poland's current annual GDP. It's equivalent to the entire defense budget of France for the next 15 years. This isn't tweaking, this is transformation. But here's where it gets interesting. Most nations telegraph ambition through diplomatic posturing or soft power plays. Poland is doing something different. It's buying hard power, lots of it, and the first place it's spending is the one area that makes neighboring countries nervous. Poland is building the largest land army in Europe. Let that sink in. Larger than Germany's, larger than France's, and it's doing it in less than a decade. The numbers are wild. 500 Abrams tanks from the United States, 980 K2 Black Panther tanks from South Korea, over 600 K9 self-propelled howitzers, 48 F-35 stealth fighters, dozens of Apache attack helicopters, Patriot missile defense systems, HIMARS rocket artillery. The shopping list reads like a superpower's arsenal, because that's exactly what it is. The military portion of the $700 billion plan is estimated at over $120 billion. That's more than double Poland's total defense spending from the previous decade, combined. And it's happening now. Contracts are signed. Deliveries are underway. By 2026, Poland will field more tanks than any European NATO member except Turkey. Why? Geography. Poland sits on the eastern flank of NATO. It borders Belarus, a Russian client state. It's less than 200 kilometers from Kaliningrad, a Russian military exclave. And after February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, every strategic calculation in Warsaw changed overnight. Poland watched a neighbor get overrun. It saw the limits of Western response times, and it decided never to be in that position. But this isn't just defense, it's deterrence at scale. A military this large doesn't just protect borders, it projects influence. It gives Poland a seat at every strategic table in Europe. It makes Warsaw indispensable to NATO planning, and it sends a very clear message to Berlin and Paris. We're not asking for permission anymore. The Iron Wall is real. It's being built in real time, but military strength alone doesn't make a superpower. For that, you need economic muscle. And that's where the second half of the $700 billion bet comes in. Poland isn't just arming up, it's building out massively. Over $300 billion is earmarked for infrastructure. High-speed rail networks connecting Warsaw to Berlin, Vienna and Prague, a deep-water container port in Gdansk designed to rival Hamburg. Highways crisscrossing the country to create the logistics backbone of Central Europe. Energy infrastructure, nuclear plants, LNG terminals, renewable grids to achieve energy independence by 2035. This is nation building at industrial scale. And then there's tech. Krakow, Wrocław and Warsaw are becoming serious players in the European tech scene. Poland is pouring over $50 billion into R&D, AI development, semiconductor research, and cybersecurity. It's not trying to compete with Silicon Valley. It's trying to become the tech hub of Eastern Europe, and it's working. Over 2,500 startups launched in Poland in 2023 alone. Venture capital inflows hit record highs. Google, Microsoft and Intel have all expanded operations there. Compare that to Germany. Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse, is choking on bureaucracy. Its infrastructure is aging. Its tech sector is fragmented. France is growing but slowly, hampered by labor strikes and political instability. Poland, it's moving like a startup nation. Approvals are fast. Investment is flowing, and because wages are still lower than Western Europe, it's attracting both capital and talent. The GDP gap is closing fast. In 2000, Poland's GDP per capita was roughly 30% of Germany's. By 2023, it had risen to 60%. If current growth rates hold, Poland could hit 75% by 2030. That's not catching up, that's converging. But rapid growth creates friction. And not everyone in Europe is thrilled about Poland's trajectory, which brings us to the uncomfortable question, what happens when the regional underdog starts demanding a bigger voice? Here's the problem. Poland's rise isn't happening in a vacuum. And not everyone is cheering. Germany and France have dominated EU policy for decades. They set the agenda, they broker the deals, and they expect deference. Poland's government has openly clashed with Brussels over judicial reforms, media freedom, and migration policy. The EU has withheld billions in recovery funds as leverage. Poland responded by doubling down on its investments and securing bilateral defense deals with the US and South Korea, effectively bypassing EU approval. This creates a power vacuum problem. If Poland becomes militarily dominant and economically indispensable, but remains politically at odds with Brussels, the EU's cohesion weakens. Some analysts argue this is already happening. Poland is acting more like a sovereign power than a compliant member state, and that makes the Franco-German axis nervous. Then there's demographics. Poland's population is aging. Its birth rate is 1.3 children per woman, well below replacement. By 2040, Poland could lose 5 million working-age people. That's a labor crisis waiting to happen. The $700 billion plan assumes economic expansion. But who's going to build the infrastructure? Who's going to staff the factories? Poland's answer is immigration. But here's the irony. Poland's government has been vocally anti-immigration on political grounds, while quietly admitting over 2 million Ukrainian workers since 2014. That's a contradiction that could become a liability. And then there's debt. $700 billion doesn't materialize out of thin air. Poland's public debt is projected to rise from 50% of GDP in 2022 to over 65% by 2030. That's manageable if growth continues. But if a recession hits, or if interest rates spike, the debt load becomes crushing. The bet only pays off if everything goes right. So we're left with the central question, the one that matters. Is Poland actually on track to become Europe's next superpower by 2030? Or is this just an overextended middle power punching above its weight? Let's define terms. A superpower isn't just big, it's influential. It shapes outcomes, it has economic weight, military reach, and diplomatic leverage. By that standard, Poland isn't there yet. And it won't be by 2030, but that's not the right question. The right question is, will Poland be the most strategically important country in Europe by 2030? And the answer to that is yes. Here's why. Poland will have the largest standing army in Europe. It will be energy independent. Its infrastructure will be world-class. Its GDP will likely surpass Spain's. Its geographic position, bordering Ukraine, Belarus, Germany, and the Baltic states, makes it the natural anchor of NATO's eastern flank. Every security decision in Europe will flow through Warsaw. Germany and France will still have larger economies, but they'll be stagnant, aging, risk-averse. Poland will be dynamic, young, relatively, militarily dominant, and willing to act. That's power. The $700 billion bet isn't about overtaking Germany, it's about making Poland indispensable. And by that measure, it's working. The US is already treating Poland as a peer partner, not a subordinate ally. South Korea is selling it weapons reserved for top-tier militaries. And within NATO, Poland's voice is getting louder. By 2030, Europe's power map will look different, not because Poland became a superpower in the traditional sense, but because it became the hinge state, the country every major decision pivots around, the one that cannot be ignored. Poland's rise is the story of a nation that looked at Europe's stagnation and said, "Not us." The $700 billion plan is audacious, it's risky, and it's already reshaping the continent. Subscribe to Economics Edge for more deep dives into the economic forces and mega projects redefining our world.